What up, everyone? DJ Nubis here with you on the Metal Tavern Radio podcast, doing another movie review. Now, initially, I was supposed to do this with Mr. Lambert from the entertainment headquarters, but just so much stuff going on between the both of us that finding the time to sit down and do this is nearly impossible. But I did want to get it out mainly because as I was hanging out with the Samurai guy last night, talking with him and the Gear Brothers about all things horror and movies in general. They were curious about what my thoughts were on this film. So didn't want to really leave it hanging. I did tell me we were going to be doing a review today, but it just isn't going to include Mr. Lambert, which was supposed to be on his channel. But I'm going to do it because I do need to get it out there and some content and let people know my thoughts on this, whether you care or not, it doesn't matter. So the movie is called Totally Killer. It's stars Kiernan Shipka, who, for those who are familiar with her, she starred in the TV series Mad Men for a long time. I think Corden and Neko, who was like a much bigger fan of the series, that Shipka started when she was like 6 years old on that show. I did watch a few of the episodes of Mad Men. It was a pretty good show. And of course, she was a very good young actress. And of course, I think I saw like a couple episodes of Sabrina, and then didn't really go back to it, but not because of her. Like, I think she's actually a pretty good actress. So when I saw the trailer for this, I thought, okay, um, wouldn't rush out to buy it or anything. I didn't have to rent it. I had Prime, so it was on there. I didn't have to worry about that. So basically, what you have is Shipka's playing this girl Jamie, whose mother had a bunch of friends murdered as a teen back in 1987. So, but there's like this tension with Jamie and her mother and father where, she's like kind of like the rebellious teen, doesn't really want much to do with them on Halloween. And so she wants to go hang out with friends and whatnot. But, there's kind of like this underlying thing going on with the mother and her fear of Jamie getting hurt because of that incident back then. So anyway, uh, something happens at the household with the mother where she's attacked by an assailant and murdered. And I should be noted that Jamie's father is being played by Lachlan Monroe. So for any of those people that recognize the name, he did a lot of like comedies in the late 90s, early 2000s. He was in the movie Night at the Roxbury. He was like the real fitness guy in that film, and a really funny guy and everything. But he's in this playing the father, but he wasn't at home at the time of the murder of the wife, Jamie's mother. So then, and I'm not going to give you a lot of spoilers, but that's just kind of the movie, how the movie sets up. So just be prepared on that part of it. So Jamie's distraught, of course. They didn't really end their last words really well. And so she has a young friend, teen, that she hangs with, and the teen is very smart and is trying to create this time machine. And because of what happened with her mother, Jamie wants to be able to use that to go back and stop the murders. Like, that's kind of the plan here. But it can't get the time machine to work right. But as they're trying to figure it all out, they are under attack on Halloween. And the guy basically is called the Sweet 16 Killer because now Jamie is 16. And I guess that's the new plan, is to kill more 16-year-olds. So he starts chasing around, and the time machine that the young girl built is basically a photo booth that you would see at a carnival. So as Jamie's hiding in it, the killer finally hears her because she's like pushing buttons in there and it's just kind of going wacky, doing its weird thing. And the killer comes in and stabs the console with his knife, which makes the time machine work. Like, apparently some sort of added metal has fixed the time machine and that sort. So it sends her back to 1987, just like Back to the Future. And now she's noticing she's got which is kind of interesting, even though they skipped a lot of that part, is like how she's dealing with that part of it, having to put herself in school, try to find her mom as a teenager. And eventually she does, finds out her mom's like a mean girl along with these other girls that were killed on that night in 1987. But she's also finding that the times were different back in the 80s as they are in the modern day, where everything is kind of woke and more aware of stuff that's, you should or shouldn't be saying or doing. Now, of course, she's trying everything she can to change history. So she's attempting to stop the killings from happening. But what ends up happening is they kind of start going out of order. And as you all know, if you follow any kind of movies with timelines and, you know, timetables, you mess with time, it starts changing. It's like the whole Final Destination tactic, right? So we kind of play this game throughout the movie where, you know, she's trying to prevent stuff, but it's still happening on some level, just at different locations or whatever. So, obviously, I'm not going to give you any spoilers about who it is or not, but she does eventually get the killer. But my biggest problems with the film is right now, Rotten Tomatoes, I think the critics are at like 86%, whereas the audience is at 80. So it's pretty high for a Blumhouse picture, which was one of my worries coming in. And so my biggest problem though is like it's not so much that you notice all the agenda narratives of the woke thing going on within this film. Like it's pretty evident early on because she's portraying a lot of this new attitude as she's in the 80s, but it's obviously she's not being heard because it's the 80s and no one even gives a fuck about that shit back then. But I think one of my problems is that they kind of try to portray in the film that the 80s was like this barbaric Neanderthal time when really it wasn't quite as bad as they were trying to portray in the film, which I felt was like disingenuous. I know I don't normally try to take films that seriously with this kind of stuff, but I think when you're trying to layer it on so thick that like it gets a little bit kind of BSy, I just have a hard time with that. I grew up in the 80s, so I know that sure it was different than the times are now, but to try to portray it as like everyone's just a nasty human being is just pretty ridiculous. I think that's just uncalled for and unprofessional as a director to do that. I don't think that's really necessary to go and do that shit. I did appreciate the nostalgia, the look and feel of the 80s was good. They worked on, the looks of the people, the kids, and the hair, the clothing and whatnot. I did appreciate how the time machine worked. Like, I love the effects of it. It was really kind of cool, almost warp like thing going on there whenever she would time travel. And so I enjoyed that. That was a really cool effect in there with that. Shipka was brilliant. She didn't really disappoint as the actress in this, and I really enjoyed her work. But like I said, just some of the other stuff kind of takes away from it. And the only other issue really towards the end is the plot device for the killer gets messy. Like it really gets messy towards the end. And I mean, even though you understand what's happening and why, it's like you go from again, it goes to this point of like, okay, so this guy's killing these people, these girls, for a specific reason. But then when the reason is exposed, you're like, well, then do you really feel sorry for them for that? You know what I mean? Like, normally it's just like killer bad, we don't really condone that. But in this case, it's almost like they want you to condone the killings in some way as if they were legitimately done because again, they're portraying these teen girls as being like monsters and infallible. And again, like some of the other antics with the football players, some of that stuff does happen back then, sure. Um I kind of just have to shake my head though. It is like, you really think modern age of teens aren't as nasty or cruel or even worse than the 80s? I find that very funny because the way that the world right now tries to portray this with the modern generation is pretty ridiculous. If you go on the X, aka Twitter, you will see a gazillion videos of how students act in a classroom, assaulting teachers, assaulting other students. It's not that assaulting fights back in the day didn't happen. It's just that you didn't assault teachers back then. And if you did, you got dealt with hard. Nowadays, you get basically a cookie for doing shit like that. And it's really just this portrayal that the 80s were are so much worse than what we have now is kind of just a ridiculous thing. And so for someone like myself, I love slasher films. I do. And I love that they attempted this. It's a good plot device. It's fun on some level. But you're kind of missing the mark too, because you're trying again when directors are trying to force in this other narrative or agenda within the film instead of just concentrating on your story, it hurts the film. And I haven't spent much time reading any reviews of whether, whether good or bad on this. And it's probably going to be very controversial with people. I don't know how they're going to come out of this. I think the audience score was higher about a day or two ago when this got released. So it looks like it's dropping in that regard. So I don't know how long it will stay at 80. It may go under that, but I can certainly see why the critics like it because they do love themselves some wokeness within everything that happens. Um, but I think that when you're trying to be a good horror storyteller, that you need to concentrate on the horror, concentrate on the story. Uh, it's okay, like, when I watched, when Neko and I watched, Last Voyage of Demeter, there was a little bit of that stuff in there, but it was so fucking subtle, it just never hurt the story, and the movie was great. And that's how you go about making a film using modern, uh, approaches to humanity and how people are supposed to interact with one another. Um, I just felt like they kinda went overboard with the whole, like, 80s thing is just so trashy and, there no one's really good back then. It's really kind of just ridiculous in my opinion. I don't know if they were just trying to do it for laughs or whatever, but it just really didn't fall for me on that. Um, I know I'm kinda being brutal with my review even though I feel like I give it, like, a decent score. Um So, like I said, the critics gave it like an 86. The audience gives it 80. I probably am going to give it like a 6.5 or 7. That range, as far as like the entertainment. Really, it's Shipko kind of saves the film. She's brilliant in the film. But outside of that, like, just it's a bit of a mess. And the funny thing is, too, and I know it's supposed to be kind of like your black humor comedy. Uh, At no point was there really any scares, and now, some people say that may not be necessary, but I think, the mask that's used is really cheesy and dumb. I forget who it's supposed to be. I don't know if it's Jimmy Carter or something. I forget who it was. It was mimicking, but you could have gone anything. I know you're not gonna go all full out scream and stuff like that, but you could have done anything but that. Like, that's just it wasn't scary at all. It's just kinda dumb. So, I don't know, like, again, I had issues when I saw the name Blumhouse come up because the majority of Blumhouse's material to me is trash. It's just not good. Um, then once in a while, they will have some stuff that I don't think is a bad thing or terrible, but majority of it's just bad, and this doesn't really help it any. It's really kind of a waste, for a great actress like Shipka to me. I know she'll probably, if she ever sees this, she'll be like, "You crazy, man. I love that film. I love what I did." That's fine. I don't care. It's just one man's opinion. But yeah, so aside from some of the messiness at the end, you could say it's a little bit predictable there with that. But at the same time, like, the motivation for what's going on. again, seems to be turning it to the point that, like, well, why should we feel sorry for these girls? Because apparently they're shitheads anyway, right? So, yeah, I think a 6.5 or 7 is about the tops that I can go with this, and, that's where I'm gonna have it at, man. Like, outside of that, just, I would recommend checking it out for yourself, see what you feel about it. It's on Amazon Prime right now if you have that, so, check it out, and, hope you enjoyed the review, and, if you have any comments about how you felt about it or if you agreed or anything, just let me know. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, please. It would help us a lot, with the algorithm, and, we'll see you next time here on the Military Radio Podcast.
You see me for you.